My dad secretly replaced me with his stepson. I found out at his funeral. I hadn't spoken to my father in over 3 years when I got the email. Not a call. Not even a text. Just a sterile message from a law firm I didn't recognize. Subject line in all caps. Notice of death, Alan Throne. For a moment, I thought it was a scam. But then I saw the firm's name, Holland and Briggs. That was real. He'd mentioned them once when I was still in college, back when we used to talk about things like estate planning and the future. Before everything went silent, the body of the message was just as cold. You are listed as an interested party in the affairs of the deceased Alan Thorne. A reading of the will and memorial service will be held on Friday, March 3 RDE 10-0A. M. Location, Evergreen Memorial Chapel. No sorry for your loss. No personal note. No message from his wife. Just a time, a place, and a reminder that I was no longer part of the family chain of communication. My heart didn't break right away. Instead, I felt that familiar numbness, the kind that creeps in when you're not sure whether to feel pain or just let the emptiness take over. I sat on my couch for a long time, phone in hand, staring at the screen, wondering why I hadn't called him first, why he hadn't reached out. The last time we spoke was a short, clipped conversation after a Thanksgiving dinner that didn't end well. I had asked him calmly, respectfully, why Brian, his stepson, was suddenly being brought to every family meeting, every boardroom conversation. Why I wasn't even told about the quarterly shareholder updates for the family business anymore. He said something vague about new directions and not everything needing to go through you, Mark. After that, nothing. Silence. 3 years of it. I thought about not going. What was the point? He hadn't wanted me in his life when he was breathing. Why should I show up when he was gone? But something tugged at me. Not closure. Not obligation. Just a burning question. Why? So I booked the flight. Not to mourn him. Not to say goodbye. But to finally find out why the man who raised me chose to vanish without ever saying a word. I was told my father died, but no one told me I'd already been erased from his life. The moment I stepped into Evergreen Memorial Chapel, I knew I didn't belong. The room didn't feel like grief. It felt like a corporate gala. Rows of men in tailored suits, women in designer black, murmuring in polite voices, sipping coffee from catered carts. There were brochures, yes, brochures with a photo of my father on the front, smiling behind a quote that read, "Legacy is not what you leave behind. It's what you build into others." I stood near the back, unacknowledged. No one turned to greet me. No warm embraces. Just nods from strangers who assumed I was another quiet investor or legal consultant. Then I saw Brian. He stood front and center in the receiving line, shaking hands like a politician, accepting condolences with the perfect tilt of the head. Yes, thank you. He was an incredible mentor. Mentor? Not father? The words stuck in my throat. His black suit was sharp, his tie perfectly straight. He looked like someone who had practiced this moment for years. When my turn came, Brian's smile didn't falter. He reached for my hand like nothing was wrong. "Mark," he said softly, "glad you made it." No hug. No apology. Just empty, polished politeness. "We didn't know if you'd come." I looked at him, studying his eyes, trying to find even a flicker of guilt. Nothing. I stepped past him, took a seat near the back, alone. From there, I watched my father's wife, my former stepmother, give a short speech about how Alan had shaped a visionary new generation. And then, like it was planned, Brian stepped up. He spoke of values, of business principles, of carrying on Dad's legacy. Every time he said Dad, I felt something split inside me. No one mentioned me. Not once. I wasn't listed in the program. I wasn't even labeled son of the deceased. The only family that existed now, apparently, was Brian. And the people around him nodded, accepted it, like I'd never been part of Alan Thorne's story at all. I left early. I couldn't breathe. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, but it helped. I leaned against a stone pillar and tried to calm the shaking in my hands. My father hadn't just cut me out of his life. He'd rewritten the story completely and cast someone else in my place. They called him the Son. They called me a guest. And I realized I didn't belong anymore. The law office smelled like old books and disinfectant. I sat in a polished room with dark wood paneling and no windows, surrounded by people who looked like they had been coached on how to react. Brian sat across from me, legs crossed, calm as ever. My father's wife, Caroline, perched next to him with her hands folded in her lap, eyes downcast but composed. The lawyer, a man named Craig Delaney, shuffled through papers with the weight of someone who knew this wouldn't go smoothly. He cleared his throat. As per the last will and testament of Alan M. Thorne, signed and notarized 18 months ago, the following designations are to be executed. I felt my stomach twist. 18 months ago. That was well after our last conversation. He'd already decided by then. Delaney began reading. To Brian Emerson, my stepson, I leave full ownership of Thorne Consolidated Industries, including all assets, holdings, and intellectual property rights. Additionally, I leave the Lakeview estate, all vehicles registered under my name, my private collection of watches, and the Thorne Family Trust in its entirety. My ears rang. I looked down at my hands just to ground myself. He wasn't done. To my wife, Caroline, I leave the remaining assets not already designated, including all shared personal property and financial accounts under joint management. He turned the page. There was a pause, a beat too long. Delaney cleared his throat again. There are no other named beneficiaries. Silence. I blinked. That was it. No mention of me. Not even a token gesture. No letter. No item of sentiment. Not a photograph, not a dollar, not a word. I was invisible. Delaney looked up, visibly uncomfortable. Mr. Thorne made it clear this was his final version. He reviewed it personally with our office last spring. I nodded slowly. Of course he did. Brian leaned forward slightly. This doesn't change anything, Mark. It was his decision. He thought it was best. I didn't answer. I just stood up and walked out. My hands were shaking again, but not from grief, from rage, from humiliation, from being erased so thoroughly that even a legal document couldn't find space for my name. My name wasn't even printed, just a gap where I used to exist. I didn't go home after the will reading. I couldn't face the silence of my apartment. Instead, I drove aimlessly until I found myself in front of the old house, the one I grew up in before my dad moved in with Caroline and Brian. It had been sold years ago, but the memories were still welded to the porch and the faded mailbox with our last name on it. I parked across the street and sat there for a while, just watching. It felt like watching someone else's life. Later that evening, I drove to the storage facility where my father used to keep old business files and family junk. The key still worked. I wasn't even sure why I went there. Maybe part of me hoped to find something, anything that reminded me I had once mattered to him. The unit was cold and smelled like cardboard and dust. I went through boxes at random, invoices from the 80s, travel souvenirs, old golf clubs. Nothing personal. Nothing real. Until I found a black leather-bound notebook wedged behind a stack of yellowing ledgers. Inside were letters. Some typed, most handwritten. Notes to board members, thank you cards, birthday reminders. And in the middle, folded in half and tucked between the pages, was an envelope with my name on it. Just my name, Mark. My hands trembled as I opened it. The paper inside was yellowed, the ink slightly faded. Mark, if you were reading this, I never had the courage to say it out loud. That is my failure, not yours. I am sorry for the distance between us. I know I have made decisions that hurt you. I cannot defend them. I can only say that I believed I was doing what would protect you from what I had become. Brian is not a replacement for you, but he brought something into my life that I was too broken to see in you. That is my blindness, and I live with it. I hope you find peace, even if I am not in it. Dad, there was no date, no signature, just that half-hearted attempt at honesty buried in a notebook and never sent. A secret apology, safe from confrontation. He had written the words, but he hadn't mailed them, hadn't spoken them, hadn't looked me in the eye once to say them. He left the words, but not the courage to say them. I stared at that letter for what felt like hours. I read it again, then again. Each time, the words dug deeper. Brian brought something I was too broken to see in you. What did that even mean? I needed answers. And not poetic ones scribbled in a letter he was too afraid to send. I needed facts. I started with Caroline. I didn't call, I showed up. Her house was perfectly kept, sterile and cold, like a magazine spread that no one actually lived in. She opened the door, surprised, but didn't turn me away. She offered tea. I declined. I just want to know the truth, I said. She sighed, as if she had been waiting for this moment but hoped it would never come. You should know something, she said. Brian's biological father was a very powerful man. He was politically connected. Dangerous, in some ways. She paused. Alan wanted to protect Brian, and himself. So he adopted him quietly, changed the records, made sure there was no legal trail back to his real father. He thought he was doing the right thing. I blinked. So what does that have to do with me? She didn't answer right away. Mark, when you started questioning Brian, it shook something in Alan. I think he felt exposed, vulnerable. Like if you pushed too hard, everything would fall apart. He saw your challenge as a threat. Not to Brian, but to everything he built. That was the moment I realized it wasn't about love. Not really. My dad didn't give Brian everything because he loved him more. He did it because Brian fit into a version of his world that he could control, package, and present. I didn't fit. I questioned. I challenged. I reminded him of who he used to be, flawed, struggling, uncomfortable. Brian gave him the illusion of security. I gave him the mirror he didn't want to face. Caroline reached into a drawer and handed me a photo. It was of my father and Brian at some gala, years ago. Brian was beaming, in a tuxedo, holding an award. My dad looked proud, comfortable, complete. I wasn't in the picture. I never had been. He didn't replace me out of love. He replaced me for power. I left Caroline's house with the photo still in my hand. I didn't know why I took it. Maybe because it was proof, not of betrayal. I didn't need more of that, but of the way things really were, not how I wanted them to be. Not the story I had told myself growing up. Just the truth, raw and quiet and final. Back home, I opened a drawer in my desk and pulled out a framed picture from my childhood. Me and my dad fishing at the lake. I was maybe 10. He had his arm around my shoulder, and I was smiling like that moment meant the world. And it did. But now I realized I had no idea what it meant to him. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe something in between. I didn't go back to the company. I didn't contest the will. I didn't write some dramatic letter or post on social media. What I did instead was simple. I started writing my own name again. I took jobs that had nothing to do with the family business. I rented a space and began teaching business ethics to students who still believed success and integrity could live in the same room. Sometimes, people would ask about my father. I'd say he was complicated. That was the truth. Not villain, not hero, just a man who made his choices and chose not to look back. I learned to stop waiting for an apology. I stopped waiting for the moment where he would walk through the door and say, "You were right to be angry." That moment never came. Some people take their truth to the grave, and all you can do is decide what to do with the pieces they left behind. I kept the letter. It sits in the back of a drawer. Not because it comforts me, but because it reminds me that silence can scream louder than words. And when people are too afraid to speak the truth, they leave others to live with the echoes. So now I ask you, if your father chose silence over honesty, if he gave everything to someone else and left you with a ghost, would you forgive him? Or would you finally tell the world your story?